Welcome back to another Spirit Island video. In this video, I'm going to be continuing my Fractured guide, this time looking at openings. And this is a video that I've been pushing off for a long time, so I'm finally excited to put this together. It's taken me a couple hours to do my research, mess around with some build paths. I've put a lot of time into this video, so hopefully this is going to be pretty helpful for the community. So over here, I have an outline of the different openings I'm going to cover in this video. At the very top in the lightest color, I have the standard slip opening. Remember, slip, that is going to be the abbreviation I use for the left innate. So standard slip, the whole point of this opening is to maximize this left innate slip the flow of time. And the idea is to have it online on turn 2 such that you're able to support the team and offer a ton of combo potential. And I'm going to call that the standard slip. I think this is the easiest way to play the Spirit, especially in a multiplayer setting. Now, there are two variations of the standard slip. There's one where you start with G3, and there's another where you start with G2. And I'll talk about the slight differences between these versions. Now, yellow, I have this colored because it's a little bit more challenging to pilot, in my opinion, and it's the delayed slip. Essentially, what you're going to do is you're going to delay the turn you get your maximum slip innate. And usually you delay it to turn 3. So this is turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. So usually you're going to delay it to turn 3. Sometimes you delay it to turn 4. Anything past turn 4, I think you're just I think that's a mistake because you want to be able to give out this innate at some point in the game early on, because when you reclaim, you'll be able to do it again. So I think delaying it past turn 3 tends to be problems. Definitely, you should not delay it past turn 4. But so I call it delayed slip. This is a very contextual way of playing Fractured Days. Essentially, you use your turn 1 and turn 2 to set up, either with G3s and G2s, and then on turn 3 you hit it with a very powerful G2. Now, I'm not going to show you exactly how to play this version. I'm just going to do a very brief summary because the delayed slip is very contextual. Usually you're taking Blight to scale, stuff like that. And finally, in red, I have the all-in majors. And this is going to cover these major powers over here. So we have the bargains of power and protection, bargains of coursing paths. We have vigor, cast down, unrelenting growth, rumbling earthquake, irresistible call, and finally consuming void. So I'm going to cover all of these majors and how those will, or how Fractured will pilot games with these majors when they're found in your starting days. Okay, with that said, let's look up here and let's look at the standard slip opening. Okay, so at the very top here, I have G3, and over here I have G2. Once again, that's showing the G3 versus the G2 build. At the very top above, this is just going to represent my days that never were. Just a refresher, your days is going to be 4 minors and 4 majors that are drawn at the start of the game. I'm going to simulate a multiplayer setting. That's why you see 4 minors and 4 majors. If you're playing a solo game or a 2-player game, you're going to have 6 cards. So keep that in mind. I'm also not assuming that you get to gain that extra starting time in a 1-player game. So keep that in mind. You basically get to start with an extra time if you're playing in solo. Okay, so standard slip, how does it work? So we're going to start with that G3 here. We're going to gain that sun element. We're going to move a presence. We're going to gain a power card from the days that never were. Ideally, we want to gain a minor. We're then going to choose to gain 3 time. Now, once again, when we're gaining time, the presence is going to come off our tracks and it's going to get placed over here on the left. Whenever we spend time, the time is going to go back to our tracks. And a lot of times I'm going to either play 1 card or 0 cards. And that 1 card that I play tends to be the minor card. So like if this minor card is a disruption effect, if it's like Flow Down River, if it's Ever Twisting Trail, any fast control card, I like to play it on turn 1. Or sometimes I play it on turn 1. So that's our turn 1. Our turn 2, we're going to choose our G2. So we're going to get our moon element. We are going to gain a power card. We're going to get a minor. 1 power card goes to hand, the other card goes to our days, and that is due to the days that never were rule set. We then get to place a presence. We're going to go presence from bottom track. We then get to choose to gain a time from bottom track, and we're going to get +2 card plays. As a result, we'll have a total of 4 card plays this turn. We're also going to gain 2 energy, so we'll have a total of 4 energy. Now, what we're going to want to play is the past returns, absolute stasis, as well as the Blur of the Arc of Years. That's our 3 card plays. And then we want to play one of the minor cards that I drafted. Ideally, we want this to be a defend. Sometimes it's a controls card. Sometimes it's a blight heal. It just depends on what you draft. Now, when you play Past Returns, Absolute Stasis, and the Blur of Arc of Years, you're going to max out, or you're going to get the 2 tiers of your left innate and this tier of your right innate. Now, since we're choosing G2 as well, we have the third moon, so it actually allows us to maximize both of our innates. Now, with this G3 opening, we're going to have 4 time. Now, we can spend time for this left innate, the slip innate. We can also spend time for absolute stasis, and we can spend time if you want to repeat blur. Now, a lot of times, I only want to spend 2 time this turn. Now, why is that? Well, when I spend 2 time, we'll add the time back to our top track. So then on turn 3, if I choose to reclaim, I can gain 2 time from bottom track. So now I have an empty track of 3 plays here. Why is that important? Well, that means if I want to play these 3 cards again, I'll be able to because I have 3 plays, and I'll be able to unlock these slip innate, these bottom 2 tiers. And I'll have time in order to do that. So that is the reason why I like to only spend 2 time. Of course, you could, if you want, spend a maximum of 1 time, 2 time, 3 time. You can spend a total of 4 time, but if you do that, your following turn 3, you're going to be crippled. So really, I only want to spend 2 time if possible. Mainly, I don't like to repeat blur on this turn, but really it's going to depend on the minors. It's going to depend on the board state. But this opening is trying to set up such that you can give a ton of slips. And speaking of slips, how many slips can this build give out? Well, the first slip we can give out costs 0 time, the second one costs 1, and the third costs 2. So with this build, you can give out a maximum of 3 slips. Now, the third slip is the one that I try not to use just because it costs 2 time. It's very, very expensive. And like I said, if you're getting that third slip, it means your turn 3 is going to be pretty weak. Okay, so looking at the G2 build, how does that differ? And why am I going to choose G2 starting? Well, if I'm choosing G2 to start because my initial days sucks. And I noticed a lot of comments either on Discord or on some of the YouTube videos. People say they're like, oh, your days are always so good. Well, most of the time they are going to be good. It's very hard to miss in solo. It's going to be very hard to miss on 12 drafts, right? You have 12 cards. If all of them suck, it's very rare that all of them are going to suck. So almost always there's going to be at least 1 or 2 cards that I can make use of. Now, in those rare cases where they all do suck, that's when I'm going to open up with the G2, because that allows me to dig 4 cards deeper. So in this case, I'm going to add a presence. I'm going to gain 2 time. Very similar layout to my top over here. The only difference is I'm going to actually gain an extra card. An extra card will go into days, and I'm going to have 1 less time. So with the G3 start, I have 3 time. With the G2 start, I have 2 time. Now, I do gain an extra presence on the board, and that is actually very important because, as you guys have seen in my previous videos, once you go blighted, or just in general, Fractured is placing very few presence, so having an extra G2 means you have an extra presence on the board, which can be very important for targeting for those 0 cost range or those 0 range cards, or just effects that require specific placement of your presence. You'll have an extra presence such that you can easily target. So that is one of the other benefits of leading with G2. Now on turn 3, we're going to do G2 again. So you're actually going to end up in the exact same position as you did with your G3 start, except like I said, you found an extra draft from turn 1, you have an extra presence on the board, but you have 1 less time. Now, what's important to point out with this is, like I said earlier, you had access where you could spend 2 time and you would reach this state. That is the same thing for Fracture Days with this build. It's just you cannot max out as much time or as much slips as you could previously. So like for instance with this build, I said you could give out 3 slips, and that would cost 3 time. You now have 1 extra time if you want to use your stasis, right? But now if you look over at this build, if you decide to do that, use your slip 3 times, you've actually spent all of your time. That means you can't use your stasis. So keep that in mind. Because you have less time, you're a little bit more restricted with the cards that you're going to use, or those, or yeah, the cards that you're going to resolve. So this is the standard slip. The whole point of this build is just to max out your slip innate on turn 2 and to power up the team. So now, looking at the next opening, we have the delayed slip opening. Now, as I mentioned before, this is extremely contextual. I can't tell you what to do here, but essentially you're going to be choosing your G3 or your G2 starting, gaining cards. Maybe you play your miners to disrupt the invaders, trying to stall out. Maybe you plan on taking some blight to scale. I can't tell you exactly what to do. All I can say is that the point of this opening is to delay your max slip innate. That means you're not playing your cards on this turn 2, or you're playing only some of them such that you can only hit the tier 2 such that you can reclaim your slips. So I currently have this shown as your G3 followed by G2 and then G2 by G2, but really it's just going to depend on your master plan and when you want to max out the slip innate. I do think this is probably, I don't know, I don't want to say the hardest to play. It's really just going to depend on the adversary, what cards you're drafting, who's at the table, stuff like that. Okay, so now we get to the fun part of the video, and that is the all-in major build. So starting off, we're going to have bargains of power and protection. And this is what I believe to be Fractured's best major in the entire deck, especially for solo play. So what is bargains and power and protection? This is the card here. It's a 2 energy fast power, sun, water, earth, animal, 0 range targeting a Dahan. It then has the bargain cost here, and then it says from now on, each Dahan within 1 range of your presence provides defend 1 in its land, and then you gain 1 less energy each turn. And then this is the threshold. So what is the build if this card is in our starting days? So first, I like to start off with G3 here. I'm going to gain that major power, and I'm going to forget Poor Time Sideways. Now this is, or it tends to be the cannon fodder for this spirit. Usually we're forgetting this card whenever we gain a major. And I'm going to choose to gain energy 3 instances. So I'm going to gain 0 time. I'm just going to get 6 raw energy, and then I'm going to get a single energy off my tracks. So starting off with G3. Now on turn 2, that's when we're going to do some crazy stuff. So we're going to choose to gain a power card. We're going to gain a minor power. That minor power will go into our hand. We'll play it, and then 1 minor goes up here. We'll place a presence from bottom track, and then we're going to choose to gain +4 card plays. So we have 4 card plays here, 1 card play here, so we can play 5 cards. Now, as you saw in the previous section of this video, we're going to play our 3 cards, Past Returns, Stasis, and Blur, plus the Moon that will activate our both tiers of our innates. We are then going to play our Bargains of Power and Protection that will cost us 2 energy. And then we would like to play a card that has water. Now, if the card has water, it means we get to threshold bargains. And when we threshold bargains, the presence, when we activate it, will come off our tracks. So ideally, we played a water card. I'm going to assume this water card has or costs 1 energy. If it costs 0 energy, that means you're going to have more energy banked up. Now, because you have this slip, you have 0 time, but the first time you use this slip innate, it costs 0 time, which means we can reclaim a card. We're going to reclaim our bargains, and we're going to play our bargains. So on turn 2, we're going to have a double bargains set up to have this very powerful defend. And assuming we threshold it, I'll make my little box here because I saw the box is gone. Go. Now, assuming we have it thresholded, 2 presents will come off bottom track, and this is what your board will look like. You'll have your bargains with 2 presents on it. You'll have your tracks like this. You'll have 1 energy, and that will be it. Now, let's talk about some odds. So, every element in the entire game has 38 instances in the minor deck. So let me rephrase. So the minor deck has 100 cards in it, and of those 100 cards, 38 of them is going to have each element. So that means there's 38 water cards, there's 38 sun cards, there's 38 earth cards, and so forth. Now, when you factor in elemental boon, this goes to 39, and when you factor in nature's connection, this goes to 40. So there's 40 cards of every element in the minor deck. So what I have here is the odds of hitting that water card on turn 2. So assuming there's 40 cards in the deck, or 100 cards in the deck, but 40 cards are water, you'll have an 87.6% chance to hit a card with water on a single draft. Now you can use this odds for any element that you're looking for. Maybe you're playing Rising Heat, right? And you're looking for that fire card. Well, it's an 87% chance of hitting it on your first draft. So this goes for any element. Now, it's a little bit more complicated with Fractured because we gain cards in our days. So there's a chance that that water card can end up in our starting days, or there's a chance where we end up with no water cards in our starting days, which means the odds can get warped a little bit. So let's assume that our starting days, all 4 of the cards have 0 water, and that all of the water cards remain in the deck. So basically, no water here, and we're drafting. Well, the odds actually shoots up a little bit. It goes to 88.9% chance of hitting a water card here. Now, let's assume the opposite. Let's assume we got unlucky and all 4 of our cards have water in it. In this case, 36 cards left in the deck, water cards left in the deck, and in the deck is 96 cards. You'll have an 85% chance. Basically, the point I'm trying to show you guys here is the chance of hitting a water card is pretty damn high, right? I mean, of course, if you're playing with a 6-player game and people are drafting, maybe some of these water cards is going to be drafted by other players. It definitely, these odds can definitely change, but you should assume that you're going to have about a 75% to 80% chance of hitting a water card here and getting that proliferation. The proliferation is really nice because that means there's going to be more presence on the board. If you don't hit the prolif here, it means that you'll lose presence on the board because that's what the card does. It will take a presence off the board instead of your tracks. So keep that in mind for the odds. Okay, so we talked about that. Let me kind of showcase what this is doing here because I haven't really showcased this effect. So looking at the board here, I get to place a presence. So I should have 4 presents on the board. Let's say I put my presence over here. Well, now because I've used bargains twice, that means everywhere where there's going to be a Dahan, each Dahan will defend 2 as a passive. So this is exactly how my board looks now, and it'll be like this for the entire game. Well, what makes this card so busted on Fractured is Blur, as Blur is allowing me to increase the defend count as well as maneuver Dahan. So maybe I use Blur in a land, like here, adding a Dahan, and I can move Dahan. So now it looks like defend 2, defend 2, defend 2. So I can kind of manipulate and set up the Dahan defense very favorably. Or maybe, let's say it looks like this, and I use Blur there. Well, now I'm going to cause it to build. It immediately ravages, killing it, and then it adds a Dahan, and now I can move Dahan. So you can actually use this passive defend that you're getting to clear lands with Blur. And this is why this card is just so good on Fracture days. Okay, so this is our turn 2. What does turn 3 look like? So turn 3, you're going to have some problems. And there is this bargain cost where you're gaining 1 less energy a turn. So every turn, you have a -2 energy or a debt that needs to be paid. Well, you have no cards in your hand, so you're going to just start off by reclaiming. 2 presents will come off bottom track. And you'll have 1 energy left. So you'll gain 1 energy. So your debt is -1. The good news is this never carries over to other turns. So if you can't pay the debt this turn, it gets erased. So, which is pretty nice. I wish real life was like that. But so We're going to play some cards. So we have Past Returns and we have Blur the Arc of Years. Because we have both our Sun Moon, we are going to have this innate here, and we have the energy enough to play Blur. So as you guys just saw, we'll be able to play Blur on turn 2, which we did here. We can play Blur on turn 3, and if we want, we can repeat it by spending a time. Now, I'll let you guys decide if you want to spend the time or not. For the purpose of this example, I'm going to assume I'm spending the time. So I've now used Blur. I then can use this innate. I'm going to use that innate to reclaim the Blur card. So now Blur will go back to my hand. I could then use this innate. Well, I guess I could use this innate first to target someone else to give them a reclaim if I really wanted to, and then I can use it on myself to reclaim Blur. But basically, we want Blur to go back to our hand. Well, now, so we'll have Blur, we'll have these 3 cards, and now we're going to choose our G3 again. And once again, remember our debt is -2. We are going to choose to gain 6 energy. So we're at plus 6 energy, -2 debt. So we are at 4 energy gain for the turn. And then we gain an energy off our top track. So we're going to have 5 energy over here. Now we also can move presence, and this is where if we need to, we can move that presence such that we can shuttle that AoE defend across the board and help other players if we really wanted to. We're going to play that Blur again. Like I said, we reclaimed it last turn. We're going to play it this turn. That's going to cost 1 energy. And ideally, you want to play a Moon card here. Because when you play the Moon card, it will allow you to, once again, reclaim your Blur such that you don't have to reclaim. You can just choose G3 again next turn, or you can choose your G2. So you want to have a Moon card. Well, this is where on turn 2, it matters. So remember I said earlier, you're going to draft a water card. So you're drafting a water card, but then one of the cards goes up into your days. Ideally, you want that card to have a moon. So keep that in mind when you're drafting on turn 2. You want a moon card for your turn 4. Now, ideally, you play Blur, you play your moon card, you use Blur, and then you reclaim it. And then, yeah, so also last turn, if you chose to not, if you chose not to repeat your Blur with the time, you would have 3 plays here, and then you can have a more diverse turn. Really, this turn 4 here, you really can do anything. I'm saying G3, but like I'm saying G3 gain a bunch of energy. You could choose to gain less energy to have more time. It just depends on what you're trying to do. But basically, you want to be playing Blur every turn for the rest of the game because this is your way to increase your passive defend. It also allows you to maneuver Dahan and set up where you want those counterattacks. Okay, so we spent a lot of time on this because I think this is the most important major build to focus on. We're now going to jump into coursing paths. Earlier I had not recommended. I deleted it, but I really don't recommend this build, but I'm going to talk about it anyways. Okay, Bargains of Coursing Path. The build is going to look very similar to the Bargains of Power and Protection. Very similar, but slightly different. Once again, we're going to choose our G3 here. We're going to gain plus 4 energy here in 1 time, which is a little bit different than we did before. Play no cards for getting poor time sideways, all standard stuff. We're going to choose our G2 again. We're going to be playing our 3 cards. We're going to have our moon. We're going to play our bargains. And then once again, we want to play that water card. Here are the odds. We've already talked about it. And we can spend a slip to repeat bargains. So once again, we're kind of at a very similar spots, but there's a few differences here. So first, this bargains requires lands with 2 Dahan in them to trigger your portals. So this could be a little bit awkward on your board. And this is why you might need to use Blur. And you might even need to spend that starting time to repeat this Blur such that you can set up multiple lands with 2 Dahan. So that is exactly why on turn 1 we chose to gain an extra time in case we needed to spend that time to set up the Dahan properly. So one of the reasons why I don't like this build and why I don't recommend it is you're creating a lot of portals. You're going to create 4 portals. Let's say I did the portals. Let's say I added Dahan here. Let's say I did this. And I was able to add portals here, 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 and I donated 1. Well, the problem is I actually don't have any actions on this turn 2 to actually deal with the invaders that are ravaging. That means on this turn I'm having two sets of ravages or two blights that are going to added onto my board, and I have no counterplay for that. Um, Unlike the other build with power and protection, the Dahan just counterattack and they're defending the lands. Here you're taking a lot of blight in order to activate this. In addition, your following turn on turn 3 here, you really can't do the whole play blur stuff trying to set up counterattacks. You actually got to draft again, and that's where you'll probably have to G3 or G2, get some energy, get some power cards, such that you can draft answers for your board. So I find the coursing paths build it's something to mention because this is a line of play that you can take with fractured, and in some games, like if you have an ocean or if you have like a tank like green, this might be the build to take this in. But it's more contextual than the bargains of power and protection. With power and protection, I think you should run that build if it's in your days. I think it's in your best interest to run the build I showed there. But in this case, I don't think it's always the case. Right, looking at the next build here, we have Vigor of the Breaking Dawn. So this is another very powerful build with the all-in majors. So Vigor of the Breaking Dawn, this is a 3 energy, fast power, sun animal. You're going to do tons of damage in lands with Dahan, and you can easily threshold it, which allows you to amplify the lands that you deal damage in. And because you have Blur, you're adding more Dahan, you're moving Dahan. It just works so perfectly. So how does this build work? I like to G3 starting, going 3 presents from bottom track, playing both Blur as well as past returns, using Blur to add Dahan, maneuver Dahan to set up for Vigor. Now, over here, once again, I have the odds of finding a Sun animal card. And what's really interesting here is we just need to plan for it to be in our starting days. So if our, assuming there's 12 Sun animal miners in the deck, out of 100 cards, you have a 40.5% chance of hitting it. If you're, so this is the odds. Now, if let's say, and this is the odds of just starting the game with it in your days, it's 40.5% chance of hitting it. Now, let's say you miss here. Well, you can always open with a G2, and in which case you have a 41.9% chance to hit. And in both cases, you're going to look like this, 3 presents off bottom track, and you're going to be playing these cards here. So you have about a 40% chance to hit. So that's our turn 1. On turn 2, we'll have enough energy to play Vigor plus the Sun animal card that costs 1 energy. And with G3, you're going to have the the third Sun needed to threshold Vigor, and you'll be able to throw this out. You already set up last turn with Blur, so you'll be able to do some serious damage on this turn. And as you guys can see here, we went with 2 presents off top track, and then we went with the +2 energy option. So now turn 3, this is where things kind of they get interesting. I like to G3 here. Now remember on turn 1, we ended up reclaiming Blur. Well, I'm G3ing again. Ideally, I want to find that Moon Miner, and I want to be playing Blur as well as that Moon Miner here, and I'm going to spend that time such that I can repeat Blur. So I'm trying to maximize a ton of freaking Dahan on the board. Now that Moon Miner is really important here because it's going to allow me to use my Slip Innate such that I can slip my Vigor as well as my Sun Animal card back to my hand. And that's what this dotted arrow is showing. I'm using some slips. I'm using a 2-time here off bottom track. And I'm putting, and that is to give me 2 reclaims plus spending a time for Blur. And that looks like this. And now on turn 4, I can G3 again, going with tons of energy, playing my Vigor, playing my Sun Animal card, and that is going to be insane because I've had +1 Dahan, +2 Dahan, +1 Dahan, so I have an extra 3 Dahan on the board, and I'm going to just wipe the board on this turn. This is our turn 4. And then on turn 5, you pretty much can reclaim. You're going to have a ton of freaking energy. You can set up pretty much whatever you want. If you want, you can set up a you actually should have blur here, but um you can set up the blur, past returns, stasis, and then you can slip Vigor in. You can slip your Sun Animal in. There's tons of things you can do at this point. Really, it's just going to depend on what you would like to do on turn 5. Now, I feel like with the bargains in power and protection, when you see that, you want to do the major build I showed. Now, the Vigor of Breaking Dawn, this specific build here, I find that you can sway from this build and still have pretty favorable results. This is if you want to go all in with Vigor. I've had games where I decided to go with the Vigor on turn 4, and I played like a slip defend build and on turn 1, turn 2, and on turn 3, basically I played a delayed game and then just built up for a very powerful Vigor turn on turn 4, and that is like with a delayed slip build. But it's very contextual. This is if you would like to go all in majors. So all in Vigor of the Breaking Dawn. Okay, almost there. We're at 30 minutes here. So this build is the Irresistible Call build, and what makes this, well, I shouldn't say build, but being able to play this on turn 1 and telling you guys that you can, it's huge. It's really important. G3 gaining 6 energy, having Irresistible Call, being able to throw this card out turn 1 is massive. So you'll have that Sacred Site, and you'll want to choose somewhere on the board where you can stop multiple builds. I'm not always going to do this. It's going to be dependent on the adversary, dependent on the explorers, dependent on the spirits at the table. But this card can do some serious work, especially into Prussia or into Sweden. I've had this card stop multiple city builds, multiple future ravages. It can do so much value. But once again, you are like spending an entire like growth option and turn just to play a single card, and it definitely hurts your slip economy. So the value of playing this card needs to be extremely high in order to make this move on turn 1. All right, the next one is Rumbling Earthquake. Once again, another 6 energy major that we can play on turn 1, and this is going to do some serious damage to buildings, up to 12 damage, and it's going to be excellent into Scotland, into England. What's really cool is you're using your G3 here, so you can maneuver your presence such that you can set up a sacred site that's more favorable if you would absolutely like. So like given this explorer here, if it sands, so if it looked like this, and then it built, and jungle is the explorer. There we go. You actually have 2 routes that you could take this here. And you'd be able to have figured this out. Well, you probably would have moved here, but one option could have been you could have targeted this land, wiping out all of the inland. Another option could have been you target like H2 here, killing both cities, and then also adjacency killing the town on H1. So as you can see, you're just insanely far ahead. Of course, this is unfortunate that you have the Scotland 6 here, but it is, I mean, you're clearing your coast completely. You'll probably blur here, throw Dahan here, throw Dahan here. But yeah, so just a very, very powerful build playing this on turn 1. All right, well now we have the Consuming Void play, and this is going to be a major that it's going to suck in a ton of invaders and then do a ton of freaking damage. Now, I already have a couple of videos on my channel of showcasing just how broken this major is, but essentially what we like to do, we like to G3 turn 1, going with 2 presence off top track and then gaining 2 energy. I like to play Absolute Stasis here, as I like to use this as a way to pocket one of my lands that maybe my Consuming Void couldn't trigger. And then on turn 2, I love to G3 again, gaining +6 energy, just plenty of energy. Or essentially, I want to have enough energy to play Void, and I'm going to gain a minor power, and I'm going to use Void. I'm going to suck up all of the invaders, do a ton of damage, and then I can repeat the card by forgetting a unique, which I've forgotten, a minor. So I'd forget this card. I would forget, let's say I forgot Stasis, and then I can forget Void to repeat itself. And that's going to allow me to do 30 damage. And especially in solo games, this is enough to completely wipe out the board. If you want to see this shown, I have 2 games into England with Fractured. Just scroll through the Fractured guide and you'll surely find the ones that only last 6 or 7 minutes, and that is because of this card. So this card is pretty busted into solo into a lot of the adversaries. The big negative to this build is you are going to be taking a couple blight off the first ravage. Hopefully it's only two blights. And then you're also having 2 sets of builds, right? You're going to have that first card that's going to build, followed by that second card that's going to build. But for instance, if I did it into this Scotland here, I'd actually be a little bit scared just because I'd be taking 3 blight, 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 and blights. So I would end up going blighted because I took the extra blight there. Luckily, this card wouldn't matter. Like that would die, that would die. I would Scotland 6. I would build. The Explorer would be a mountain, which is unfortunate actually. Mountain, and I would escalate. So it'd look like this. And then I would do my double void, where I would just basically suck up everything into this land here, and it would wipe out pretty much all of this. I'd lose the Dahan. I'd lose my presence. But this is how it would look just with mountains left. Once again, it's going to be very dependent on the Explorer. The next all-in major build is going to be with Unrelenting Growth, and this is a card that allows you to hyper-proliferate other spirits or yourself at the cost of 4 energy. What I like to do is choose my G3 here, and I'm going to gain 2 presence off top track, and then I'm going to gain 2 energy, giving me 4 energy, grabbing Unrelenting Growth, once again for getting 4 times sideways, and then I'm going to play Unrelenting Growth on turn 1. So there goes all of our energy, and you have 2 options. You can choose to choose yourself, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I don't think it's a terrible option, as having more presence on the board is massive at protecting against edge cases. But if in a multiplayer game, a lot of times just giving this out to the team is just going to be massive. Giving someone 2 prolifs on turn 1 is insane. Now, you don't have to play this on turn 1. You can also just leave it in the days and plan to play it on turn 3 or turn 4 or whatever. But the fact that Fractured can play it on turn 1 is pretty insane. Most spirits don't have that ability, and Fractured gets to. And Fractured isn't even locked into it. Like, that's the best part about it, right? Like, if you're playing a spirit that's going to grab a turn 1 major, there's some drawbacks. You don't have to do those. Drawbacks don't apply to Fractured because you're not gambling on the major. You know you have the major here because you see it, because you're looking into the future. So very, very powerful. Imagine if you're playing with a player with Gifted Constancy, right? And they choose Gifted Constancy on you turn 1. Well, now you'll have 4 energy next turn. You get to reclaim Unrelenting. Now you can just play it again next turn. So it's pretty silly, the amount of crazy things this card can do on Fracture days. All right, we finally made it with the last major here, Cast Down. Now, there is a build that was talked about by Ray and also another player that made a Fractured guide about trying to hit this major thresholded. I think like turn 3, it's possible with Fractured days. You got to get a little lucky though to hit it. Well, I shouldn't say a little. It's honestly it's pretty lucky. You need to have a Water Earth card in the days, and then you need to draft a follow-up Water Earth card, which the odds is fairly low, and the build is very all in. Really, what I think, or what I'm trying to highlight here, is you could just play a normal Fractured days game, build up your hand, build up your energy econ, and then when you're ready, just grab Cast Down and then threshold it and then win the game. You don't have to rush it like you're doing with some of these other majors that I'm showing in this video. But just know that Fractured can easily threshold this major with proper drafts or with a little bit of elemental support, and you can make it go fast. You can do so many powerful things with this card because you're Fractured. So when you see this card in your days, just know that that is a avenue that you can go down. That is a build path that you can take. Now, these are the majors I've covered in this video. There are plenty of other great majors in Spirit Island that Fractured can use, and you can build major plans around them, but they tend to be very contextual based on the adversary, based on my specific drafts. The majors I'm covering in this video are the ones that I think you can have a concrete build and build towards. If you like this video, like and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next video.